PodcastRadio.com presents GCRN Wars. Two geek topics will be challenged. The ultimate battle will come to pass. One shall stand, one shall fall.
Hello and welcome to episode 13 of GCRN Wars. I'm your host as always, Optimus Solo, and joining me for this war is Steve Megatron Phillips. Hello.
Good day.
Hello. And Fridley Stent.
Hey there.
Back for another war. And Mike the Birdman Dodd. Hello, sir.
Woo! Hi.
And today we will tackle a classic science fiction argument. We will force Trekkies to face off against fellow Trekkies. The topic today is which series is better, Star Trek, the original series, or Star Trek, the Next Generation. So let the games begin. Anybody have any opening things to say before we get into the categories? Mr. Birdman?
Man, the classic series is so boned.
We shall see. Does anybody have before we even looked at before any of you guys saw the script, before anybody saw any of the categories, etc., just kind of thinking of the two series in general, traditionally, do you have a leaning one way or the other, Steve?
It depends on the category. But it without having to look at it, I'm kind of torn between both because those are my top two Trek series for multiple reasons.
What about you, Matt? Did you have a preference going into this that you thought before you started breaking it down?
Honestly, before I looked at the script, I thought exactly what Birdman was saying was that TNG's gonna win this hand over fist. But I don't think it's as close. I think it's closer than that when I look at the script.
We have yet to have a blowout, I believe, I don't have all the scores right in front of me, but I'm pretty sure they've always been pretty darn close, which brings up a good point that we should get to before we get completely into this one. We still need your help for episode 12 of GCRN Wars. If you listen to that one all the way through, you will hear that one did end in a complete deadlock, a complete tie. There's a poll up on the website that will continue to run until we record episode 14. So once we record episode 14, that poll will close and we will deem a winner in the Pirates versus Ninjas war that we had. So go to GCRN and find the page and vote in that poll so we can get a winner on that. All right, that business aside. Anybody else have thoughts before we get into category one?
No.
All right. Then let's start it off here with the first category for Star Trek versus Star Trek, and that is, of course, the iconic ships, the USS Enterprise versus the USS Enterprise. Who wants to start on which was the more impressive ship?
Well, it depends. You want me to break this down via what it accomplished or the technical details? Because the Galaxy-class starship would kick the ever-living crap out of the Constitution class.
Whichever way you'd like to go, sir.
Okay, well, let's talk about the Galaxy-class starship, which is the USS Enterprise, which was, I think, the second Galaxy-class ship constructed, because there was the original USS Galaxy, which
Correct.
was the prototype. Well, the phaser banks on this thing, I think their Type X phasers would cut right through the other Enterprise's hull like it was nothing. The photon torpedo loads are significantly larger on the Galaxy-class starship as opposed to this one. Mind, you're also talking about 100-year difference in technology as well, as the original Enterprise didn't have replicators, the transporters didn't have as long a range, science facilities were not as advanced, holodecks, need I say more, computer power, storage capacity. I mean, the Galaxy-class starship could effectively move civilizations if it had to. Like, they could evacuate planets with the proper support. A Constitution class, not a way in hell could it accomplish something like that without significant support. Plus, it just was... There were more people on board a Galaxy-class starship. I mean, I think minimum you could staff the Galaxy with 170 people. I think that's what the technical stat is. I'm not 100% sure on that. In fact, where's my technical manual? I'm just looking on my shelf here. I don't see it. But if the Constitution did have one advantage over the Galaxy, is that it did require less of a skeleton crew, but required more maintenance. Because you saw how often Scotty was always in engineering, something was always breaking. You could make the same argument for the Enterprise D in the Galaxy class line of starships, but with the invention of isolinear chips doing a lot of their computing power, a lot of the wear and tear was kind of reduced because they could identify problems before they happened and kind of do preventative maintenance, whereas the other way around, it really wasn't possible. Let me see. Steve, what am I leaving out here?
Steve, what does the Constitution have give me the upsides of the Constitution.
Well, the upsides of it is its maneuverability, its ability to be jury-rigged in whatever fashion that they need. Not saying that the Galaxy class couldn't do the same thing, because they did it on many occasions. However, the Constitution class, for one, it got a nice upgrade that actually happened, not an alternate timeline, like the Enterprise D did. And it's just the fact that there was a lot more that you could customize, more or less, with it.
Basically, I think there were a lot more configurations you could do with the Constitution class. There was a game that came out about 15 or 20 years ago now, when you really look at it. I think it was called it wasn't Starfleet Academy. It was like Star Trek Battles or something. It was done by Interplay in like 98 or something like that. And I remember there being a crap ton of configurations you could do with the Enterprise and the Galaxy class. Sure, you could do a lot of configurations, but I didn't see many more. I think the Galaxy class was a little bit, or the Constitution class was a little bit more versatile.
Matt, is this one a slam dunk?
I like, they're talking specs and numbers and things, but like, if you look at them, just look at them, the Constitution looks way more what I think of when I think of classic sci-fi, whereas the D, it just looks like a giant frumpy space city.
I definitely have to agree. If I had to compare the two, the original Constitution version wins for me every time, only because it was the first, and it just looks like the space exploration vehicle, whereas the other one screams 90s or screams 80s.
So if you could
like
have
flying
one,
saucer,
if you could either captain one, or if you could have a model of one, if you're looking at it in that respect, does that change the way you look at it? Which one would you rather have, or which one would you rather pilot?
Galaxy class, man, holodecks. I'm not leaving, and you all know exactly why.
If you had to have a model of one, which one's?
The Constitution does look a little cooler. I will give you that one.
I definitely swing towards the Constitution class. I've always been a fan of it. My favorite iteration is the A, that from the original series, because it still counts.
There's definitely a lot of different ways to look at it, and I guess you could look at it, which one looks cooler, which one can do more, which one did more. I guess it depends on which way you look at the ships, but does it? I don't know if you guys have your minds made up or not, but we'll go around and see if we got votes. Steve, I'm assuming you're voting for the original series Enterprise?
Definitely.
Okay. Matt, what do you think?
I'm gonna go with the D. I just think it doesn't look as cool.
It doesn't look as cool, but still gets your vote. I'm with you for a couple of things that Birdman was saying. As far as in a fight, it wins, and there's a lot more things to do on board. So I've always kind of leaned towards the next generation version. What about you, Birdman?
Oh, definitely Galaxy. Definitely the Enterprise D.
All right. So that does it for the first category. We're going to get into a series of categories that is comparing the characters of these two shows, and then we'll get into some other stuff towards the end outside of the characters. But starting off, obviously makes sense. We have to do the classic comparison of the captains of these ships that we were just talking about. So we're talking about James T. Kirk, and we're talking about Jean-Luc Picard. Matt, why don't you start with this one? What's your first thoughts when you think about these two individuals?
Well, they're both very cocky, confident guys. like which is something you kind of want in a TV show captain. I don't know how good it'd be in an actual military setting, but I don't know. Like I think of Patrick Stewart. He's this huge Shakespearean actor and known, worldwide. And then you've got William Shatner, who's known worldwide for other reasons.
The Shadisms.
Yeah. Like there's definitely some disparity between acting skill, but I don't know if there's disparity between captaining skill. They're different guys and they approach things differently. And I know that I don't know. I think of Patrick Stewart as huge, but I don't know if he's as well known for his Star Trek role as Shatner is.
There may be a reason for that too. As you mentioned, if you're going to look at this one from a purely acting standpoint, we don't even need to discuss it. Patrick Stewart is a far superior actor than William Shatner in any way, shape, or form you look at it. You cannot.
But come on,
he's British.
More than that. Birdman, what do you think when you think about these two guys?
I think T.J. Hooker versus Professor X is a pretty easy fight. Just saying. Honestly, for me, it comes down. I mean, actors. Patrick Stewart. I was going to call him Captain Picard. In terms of captaining, Picard without a doubt, because yes, Kirk, you did accomplish a lot, but you pissed off the Klingons more than once. Picard didn't start any wars, and he defeated the Borg.
That's true.
And he made Q spare humanity. Kirk, sure, you may have saved the Federation. Picard saved humanity. Let that sink in for a minute. Boom, headshot.
And the other thing is, from a personality standpoint, even though they're both captains and they're both from Star Trek and they're both captaining the Enterprise, et cetera, and there are a lot of similarities that you can compare, they're very different as far as personalities go. I mean, I know you said that they're, Matt, that they're both a little cocky, a little arrogant, et cetera, but I still think from like a personality standpoint that they're vastly different. From a maturity standpoint, from an intelligence standpoint, their characters are very much different. Obviously Kirk, when he's taking over, when he's taking this position, he is young, he is green, he's in a completely different position than when Jean-Luc Picard's character is introduced to us in The Next Generation as obviously more of a seasoned veteran type character. So they do have a lot of differences as well. Steve, what do you think of when you think of these two?
Well, I do love Kirk, and that was my original captain that I remember as a kid growing up, in addition to Picard. I still have to give it to Picard, only for the fact that, one, he's had to grow as a captain. For one, he had his heart stabbed out by the Nausicaans, and then which is what caused him to become the captain that he is, whereas Kirk was kind of like, he was more cocky, and whereas Picard was cocky until that point, and then everything was more calculated and diplomatic and thought through, whereas Kirk's like, let's gamble and see, and hope that the dice roll in his favor, more or less. And I think that's why, I mean, both of them have commanded more than one Federation ship. I mean, Kirk's had, the original Enterprise, the reconstructed Enterprise, the USS A, and then you have Picard that's had the Stargazer, the Enterprise D, and the Enterprise E. So, I mean, they've each had 3 ships that they've been captain of, but I think that the reason that Picard stands out more so is because he's, for the very same reasons Dodd said, he's just overall a better captain.
All right, so your vote is for Picard, Steve?
Correct.
And Dodd, you're the same?
Oh, absolutely.
Matt?
Yeah, I'm going to give it to Picard, but I think Kirk could have beaten just about anybody else.
He's going against
anybody else. I will agree.
I could make a pretty passionate argument for Janeway and Sisko.
And I'd ignore you.
Except Archer. Fuck Archer.
Yep, exactly.
Go back to Quantum Leap, asshole. Anyway.
So we have a clean sweep in this category. 4 votes for Picard.
all hate mail can be directed to.
Exactly. I know there's a ton of Kirk fans out there, and there's a ton of people that like him better than Picard. I just don't. I don't. If I'm joining a crew and I get to pick who's going to be my captain, I'm taking Picard every time. I feel more secure and more safe about my life, and
He's not reckless.
yeah, and about what we're going to accomplish and the things, not just in a battle sense, but on a just like from a humanitarian type thing and all that. So, I guess it goes back to what their voyage is all about. I think Picard can handle that better. I know going through here that some people are going to question which people I paired up with which people, et cetera, and there's probably 12 different ways you could do this. But it is the way it is, so you can direct your hate at the comparisons and who I'm pitting against each other directly to me, and that's all my fault.
Send it to feedback@geekcastradio.com.
Just say Optimus Solo's retarded.
Hashtag.
Yeah. But our next category, I decided to somewhat go with the science officers, quote unquote. And I know also some people had different roles throughout the run of their show, which we didn't mention, but I guess we can get that out of the way. Most people that are watching this, I'm assuming, know. But Star Trek, the original series, obviously was a 3-season show, 79 episodes from 1966 to 1969, whereas The Next Generation was a 7-season show, 178 episodes from 1987 to 1994. And the science officers we're comparing here in this third category would be Spock and Data. I think they're a good comparison for multiple different reasons. I know when we get through all the characters, we'll talk about some of the other ways we could have matched them up. But I like Spock and Data going against each other, and I'm actually starting this category off with no idea how I'm voting because I keep going back and forth on these two for different reasons. So it might depend on what you all say. Birdman, how do you break these two guys down? How do you compare these two, and how do you decide who's better?
Well, it depends on when you're comparing these characters. Like, do you do Data pre-emotion chip or post-emotion chip? And because that's an important distinction to look at too. Also, are you factoring in anything expanded universe, such as video games, comic books, and books? And for Spock, what you have to kind of apply the same kind of rules there as well. I mean, this is a harder category than you might think, even for me. I mean, I'm probably going to go Data, but at the same time, Spock does have that half-human intuition, whereas I wouldn't use the word reckless, but he takes calculated risks with that little bit of a human hunch, whereas Data, it breaks down by data. There literally is no, let's take a shot and see what happens. He's like, okay, if I factor this, that, and the other thing, I calculate X amount probability of success. Whereas Spock, it's a gut thing and logic. It's a logical gut response, if that makes any kind of sense.
Matt, how would you break this one down, or how would you start to tackle it?
I'm just as on the fence as you are. I'm thinking, like, who makes a better, like, co-star or person to bounce off of, because I think of like Kirk and Spock's interaction, like, you green-blooded heartless bastard and things like that, and I think like Data gets more like, it's like, hey Data, what about this? And like, oh, he's just a robot. Burr, burr. And I think that like Spock is more interesting to have in a group than Data is.
I was just about to say something similar. I was going to say, what if we look at it as who was more important to their individual series? Because to me, I initially am thinking that Data has so much more going for him, but if you look at who is more important to their individual series, that to me seems like it's Spock, because does the classic series survive, and is it as good if you take Spock out of it? Whereas Data, as good as he is, maybe has a stronger supporting cast that you could take Data out and that show still survives easier?
Yeah, because part of the appeal and the power of the original series is that chemistry between Nimoy and Shatner, not just on screen.
And DeForest Kelly.
Yeah, and DeForest Kelly. It's that trio or even that duo working together. And as much as I love Data, he's not second in command. He's third,
right,
at best. And even then, Picard will always default to Riker. He's like, well, what do you think, number one? Not, well, Mr. Data, what's your opinion? But he doesn't ask him, you know what I mean? He's going to rely on Riker more so than Data.
So I guess you can look at it one or two ways. Who is more important to their series, or who makes the better science officer? Because Data makes the better science officer.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt.
Spock is probably more important to his series. Steve, how do you break this one down? I'm still not sure where I go.
Well, I definitely see where Spock is more important to his series. However, Data has come in just as much of handy just because of the technological aspect throughout the series, whether it be hacking into systems or his positronic net. For instance, think First Contact. Would Picard have gotten out of that by himself? Probably not. He needed Data. I mean, there's a lot of... I mean, and I'm not saying that Spock hasn't helped Kirk get out of life and death situations, because he has, but I think the key thing between the two of them is one's actually alive and one's not, and the interactions that they have between everybody. Not saying that Data is treated any less by his the senior crew, because he's not, but well, at least in one season he was. But I think that Spock overall has had the most lasting effect on the entire franchise.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you were going to take like just your generic people off the street and say Star Trek and ask them to come up with, think of a name or think of a character from Star Trek, people would probably come up with Spock before they came up with Data. Well,
I mean, I think that most of the original crew, despite people not really associating with them as much, I think that those are the most iconic still, just because, you say Beam Me Up Scotty, or, Kirk to Enterprise, or, and then Spock his Vulcan, salute. So, I mean, I definitely see that. I mean, especially you look at Spock, and this kind of coincides with the original series and kind of doesn't, and kind of coincides with the Next Generation, but he's been in the Next Generation, as has Kirk, as has Scotty, as has McCoy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also in the rebooted universe and in that original series. And Spock's he's had the longest reach out of any of the original crew.
And I guess, although I was making the argument that Spock is more important to his individual series, I'm saying that from like a casting standpoint. Data may be more important to his series from a writing and a story standpoint, as far as the different types of moral questions they were able to bring up with Data as a character on that show.
Well, I definitely see that too, just because it was the dilemma of what do you consider life?
Yeah, and the human side of things. Although, I mean, not saying there wasn't similar storylines for Spock, but Data allowed them to go into areas that they wouldn't have been able to do without that character. How close are you to making a decision, Birdman?
Well, on one hand, Spock is awesome. On the other hand, Data did get to bang Tasha Yar.
That's true.
But Spock got Savick and got whoever the chick was in the original series.
In that case, Spock.
He won
up on the power of sex appeal.
Matt, what do you think? What's making the ultimate decision for you here against these two guys?
Honestly, one point that hasn't been brought up is that I think on more occasions, Data was a threat to the Enterprise than Spock ever was. There were a number of times like Data once took over the whole D by himself, just to go see his dad one more time, and other situations like that.
You can argue the same point with Spock, though, because he took over the original Enterprise under Kirk's command to get Captain Pike a hearing to send him back to Talos 4.
But you could reason with Spock, whereas Data,
once he has a program, he's not going to be able to divert from it.
No, but Spock could have diverted from his whole setup too, but he did it anyway.
True.
And he's done similar things for, like his father, and for, other reasonings that he's kind of broken the code of Starfleet to do what he thought needed to be done. And Data has done the same. And also in the same regard, both of them have been taken over and manipulated in their minds before by other forces within the Star Trek universe. So similarities can be tossed around.
So, Matt, I guess what is it? Is it the iconic more important to the series, or is it who makes the better science officer? Which way do you go?
I'm just gonna go with Spock, just based on my human intuition.
All right, that's fair enough. Steve?
Spock.
And Matt, Birdman, your official vote was Spock also?
Yeah, I'm sorry, Data.
I know.
All right. Well,
Me too.
since the category is already decided, I am going to just throw a vote out for Data, just because I don't feel like this should be a clean sweep of a category, because these two guys are too similar. There's too many things going for each other, and I'm going to go with who do I want to be my science officer, and in that case, I'm going to go with Data. But obviously, the category will still go to Mr. Spock and the
I could
original
also
series.
raise another point for Data.
Mhm.
He has a cat.
That's true, and I like cats, so. And Birdman, you like cats, so we can
Damn
share
right.
that. All right, moving on to our fourth category, another pairing of characters here, and in this time we are going with the chief engineer. Interested to see what you guys have to say about this. Scotty versus Mr. Geordi LaForge. Matt, start this one off. These two are obviously very iconic individuals. LeVar Burton, all the Beam Me Up Scotty stuff. Where do you start to try to break this one down?
Well, I don't know. A part of me wants to just be like, well, who seems like they're better at their job? And I feel like in most situations it feels like it's the TNG guy. But at the same time, I feel like Scotty did a lot more thinking on the fly. Like, Geordi knew things by the books, and he did a lot of interesting things, like the time he loaded up that holo program with the designer and, bounced off of her to get, new things.
Mm-hmm.
But I feel like Scotty did a lot more, like...
He seems like the more down and dirty handyman type of engineer.
Well, this is kind of how I see it. Scotty is more, not only is he down and dirty, but he also, back in the 23rd century, there were no other alternatives, and you were out in deep space by yourself. He had to come up with things on the fly or kind of rig things up to work to how they should be or close to how they should be. Even as far as enhancing the Enterprise compared to what Starfleet specs were. Whereas Geordi kind of had to just maintain. And he had to make modifications depending on the mission, but Scotty had to do it because they were out in the middle of nowhere. And they didn't have a choice. I mean, he was the ultimate Starfleet mechanic.
Or could you flip it around and say that Geordi was possibly shouldering a bigger responsibility because he's dealing with such a more massive system?
Geordi had more support and had Data.
True.
Geordi had help.
Yeah, exactly.
He had an entire staff in engineering. Scotty
Although
had
a lot
like
of them
3
died.
people.
I'm just kidding.
Scotty's like, damn it, laddie, show up to work for once.
Yeah. I mean, think about how often do you think Scotty left engineering? I bet you he had a bunk just off of the warp core. Whereas LaForge, he had time to go be Sherlock Holmes and everything. He had time to hang out in 10 Ford. Scotty ain't got time for that. He's got a ship to run.
He'll take his scotch in engineering, please.
Exactly.
Okay, so if you have your own version of the Enterprise, who do you want to be your chief engineer, Dad?
Scotty, because A, he thinks on the fly. 2, he doesn't need help pretty much because he can figure it out for himself. He's resourceful, and if he can't find a part, he can probably build it or procure it somehow. Whereas Geordi, as much as I love Mr. Reading Rainbow, he's at too much of a disadvantage. He's a 24th century wimp.
What about we haven't brought it up yet. Does the visor add any points to LaForge's character?
It makes him look cool.
He's used it though to do stuff that Scotty wouldn't be able to do.
True.
While that may be true, it's also been a hindrance because, I mean, look, the Klingons got a hold of a code to the Enterprise by piping into it and crashed the ship.
Geordi shows the evil of Google Glass.
He does.
Steve, are you picking Scotty as your engineer? We're assembling a dream team crew here.
I would definitely take Scotty because, I mean, think about it this way: if you're stuck with no life support and you have the option of being locked in a transporter for 75 years with the option to possibly live, I think I'd take that option. And Scotty, I think, knows how to do that, obviously, because that's what made him survive.
What about you, Matt?
Yeah, gotta give it to Scotty.
All right, this one I will allow to be a clean sweep because as much as I love Geordi LaForge, like he is one of my favorite characters in the whole franchise. But if it comes down to actually who do I want, and that's how I broke it down, I guess, with the science engineer. Who I wanted as my science engineer would be Data. Who I want as my engineer is the guy that can make something out of nothing. That doesn't matter how much book learning you do, he's going to know which thing to hit, which thing to put together. So I got to go with Scotty on this one as well. So a clean sweep for the original series in this category. And we will move on to... I know some people were these positions and some people weren't, and as the series went on, people changed positions, but we're kind of looking at the navigators/security officers of the two crews. So we're looking at Chekhov and Sulu for the original series. We're looking at Worf and Tasha Yar for the next generation. Is it a disadvantage that Tasha Yar dies? I don't know. But Birdman, how do you start looking at these four?
She was killed by black goo.
She was killed by tar.
Such a stupid way to die.
Killed by tar.
It depends on when you look at these guys, and the main reason I bring that up is the original series. It was a pretty serious time of, I wouldn't say war in the Federation, but there were constant skirmishes with like Klingons and Romulans, Tholians, basically all sorts of really bad shit. And whereas the Enterprise era, the Enterprise primarily was an exploration and science ship. Like, it was pretty much a peace vessel. However, that being said, Worf, Klingon race, first Klingon in Starfleet Academy, could you argue starship combat experience be kind of light, all things considered? And then you look at Chekhov's experiences, young and inexperienced. You could draw a pretty good parallel, in my opinion, between Chekhov and Worf. Sulu, as a security officer and navigator. Once again, he's got that think on the fly thing, and I do appreciate that. I really do. Then again, Tasha Yar, it's Tasha Yar.
And I know a lot of people like Tasha Yar. I couldn't stand her as a character.
They kept bringing her back.
I couldn't stand her as a kid. I can't stand her when I rewatch episodes of that show. I don't know what it is. So for me, it's literally, is Worf good enough to beat out Chekhov and Sulu?
You just hate Denise Crosby.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, I liked her better as a Romulan, I guess. Pseudo-Romulan, whatever you want to call it.
Oh, you mean her daughter?
Whatever. But, man, Worf as a security officer is hard to beat. As far as, like, if you're looking at it from a navigator standpoint, obviously you got to go Chekhov and Sulu. But, man, Worf is just so darn cool. Matt, how do you do this one?
I don't know. I feel like it's unfairly stacked. Because, like, when I think of navigators, I think Sulu versus Wesley.
Yeah, you could throw him in there and take Tasha Yar out, I guess, if you wanted to.
No, don't do it. It won't be fair. Take Wesley out of everything.
Oh, come on.
He's
got that awesome uniform sweater.
He likes the Wesley Crushers.
I got nothing against Will Wheaton. Like, I think he's a fine actor, kind of a douchebag in person, but a fine actor. I think the problem with that one was all script, and they wanted to force him in. But that's neither here nor there in this category. Like, I don't know. I really like Tasha Yar and Worf, but I also really like Sulu. Like, can you compare Worf's bat-left skills versus Sulu's fencing skills? I mean, they both pulled out weapons on their ships in various times.
Mm-hmm.
They're interesting guys. It's a hard one.
Sulu looks a lot cooler and goofier when he's got his fencing sword out, though.
Yeah, man. Shirtless fencing down the halls. That's what I want on my ship.
Fucking A.
Steve, what do you think?
While I do like the original series cast, I'm kind of torn because there's one I like on either side more than the other.
Is that Sulu and Worf? Or Chekhov and Worf?
It's Chekhov.
Okay.
I don't like Tasha Yar at all. I never have. I was glad when they decided to kill her off and put Worf.
Somewhat of a surprising move when they killed her off too.
I think it was like, it was along the same times that they got rid of Dr. Crusher, and then they brought in Pulaski, and then they were like, "Oh, we screwed up." I think that it caused Worf to become a better character. That again, he get to touch 2 series instead of just one.
And maybe a third.
So, what's that?
Possibly a third, isn't there? Isn't he supposed to be trying to head up his own new?
He's been trying that for about 4 years now.
Yeah, I think he's getting some headway though. No.
So they say. That's the same. Chekhov is doing Renegades, and he's an admiral in that. So
yeah,
there is that option too. But no, I mean, I think that it makes for a better case for at least Worf, I think, because he's kind of the jack of all trades. He does both of their jobs in one. He does, kind of the navigation, tactical, and communications all in one spot. Plus, he's their security officer.
If it was Worf and O'Brien, would it be better?
Probably, but O'Brien got shipped over after, 3rd season.
He didn't even have a name in the first season.
He was just transporter chief. That's it.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he also did a little bit here and there, and navigation stuff, but they booted his ass pretty quick.
Plus, he was always the O'Brien must suffer, so that means if he's on your ship, bad shit's gonna happen.
Pretty much. So as soon as they get rid of him, then because Worf would say, "Would you like me to fire?" about every time that he was at tactical, and Picard's like, "No."
So how are we going to vote in this one? I'm still, I don't know. If it's just which single person out of those 4 is the best, then it's Worf for me. But if I have to pick a team of Worf and Tasha or Chekhov and Sulu, that becomes a lot harder. Matt, how are you going to vote in this one?
I don't
Keep
know.
making you go first. I mean,
no, it's fine. I don't know. I think I like Tasha more than anyone else here, huh? I feel like I like the strong female lead on the bridge, always there. I think she was great from a writing standpoint, and I liked her as a character. Though I think that Worf became a better character once she died. I wish there was a better option, maybe getting her in trouble and putting her in a different place or something. I don't know. I don't know. George Takei is one of my favorite people in the world, so it's hard to vote against him. But I think I'm gonna have to go with TNG on this.
All right, Birdman, how do you think?
I'm going classic series here.
All right, Steve, it's 1-1 so far.
Son of a bitch. Because I like the one team more, but I like the one character more. I'm gonna have to go with Worf here.
All right, that makes it hard for me now. Man, I'm in a similar situation. Do you go with the team or do you go with the one person? I mean, I understand what you're saying about Tasha Yar, and she is good from a writing standpoint. Something just rubbed me wrong about her. I don't know if it was the actress or the appearance or what it was. Can't put my finger on it. Never have been able to. Man, who do I want as my navigators and security officers? I like the dynamic. I think, even though I don't like Tasha Yar, I like the dynamic of the two. Oh man, and I like Worf as my security officer, so I'm going to go with Next Generation on that one. Whew. All right, let's get on to the next category, which would be the medical staff. So for the original series, we have Mr. McCoy, Dr. McCoy, and Nurse Chapel, who appeared sporadically, and then we have the alternating doctors of the Next Generation, Beverly Crusher and Catherine Pulaski. I guess we should start. I want to start with Crusher and Pulaski. Which one did you prefer just amongst those two, Birdman?
You see, I actually like Pulaski, but Beverly Crusher's hotter. It's sad. That's actually a factor for me. But the thing is, I feel like McCoy and Chapel were more pioneers in their time, whereas Crusher and Pulaski did have the huge advantage of having Starfleet Medical behind them, and all the advanced tech, whereas McCoy and Chapel had to make it up as they went along. So
I'm with you. At times I liked Pulaski better too. I kind of went back and forth on which one of those. But as far as a category, I'll get mine out of the way because I think this is a slam dunk. I think with or without Nurse Chapel, McCoy wins this one.
Yeah.
Yep.
But I think it is interesting on who likes Crusher and who likes Pulaski better. But I will cast my vote now and let you guys continue talking. Matt, what do you think?
I think Pulaski was the worst thing to happen to Next Generation since Wesley Crusher.
Oh, man.
But she didn't have a bitchin' sweater.
Yeah, see, that puts her down even lower. Like the
That
only
one episode though where she grows old is so kick ass.
yeah,
Yeah,
dude, I wish
that's
she
pretty
would
cool.
Too
die.
bad she didn't die.
She looks so freaky old. I'm sorry,
Was
Matt.
she was the one that ended up fixing Worf, right, when he broke his legs or spine or whatever.
Yeah.
So like that's the one thing she's got to her credit. But even then, she didn't think it was gonna work or whatever.
Yeah.
And she had no hope in Worf and anything. I don't know. I hated Pulaski. Crusher was great, but I I have mixed feelings about the whole tension between her and Picard. Like the will they get married, won't they get
Yeah,
married?
that was annoying. I wish they wouldn't have done that as much.
Will they wear pants? Will they not?
Yeah, it was like I don't know. I think it is like unquestionably has got to go with Bones, man.
Is that unanimous?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the one thing that Pulaski made her really hateable is she hated Data.
She really did.
She had a mission to destroy Data. She's like, I hate you, you stupid android.
She was
You're
kind
not
of
real.
a racist in a weird
She
way.
was.
I
Racist old-
think I liked her because there was no fear of just going with the whole love angle with anybody. Like
She was just like, F you.
You like her because she was unlovable.
no, because she made it so that there wasn't going to be a love story line in that episode if it was dealing with her. That's what
Because she
I felt.
hated everybody.
Yeah.
She's like, you suck. But no, I'd have to go with McCoy because he was the medical badass coming up with solutions to problems that nobody had ever heard of before.
Right.
And even in the comics, he continues to do so because they had one where they had Bashir, Crusher, Pulaski, and the EMH, and they couldn't figure out some disease that came about from the original series time, and Starfleet Medical was wiped of the resources of it, and Bones happened to have it on his medical tricorder that he stole from Starfleet that he never turned back in when he quit.
Nice. All right, so it's unanimous for the original series as far as the medical staff, which leads us to our last grouping of the actual crews of these two ships, and that is the communications members, which would be Lieutenant Uhura and Deanna Troi. Birdman?
The space cheerleader or captain, we have an incoming message from Starfleet. Lieutenant
the one's got
Uhura,
going
because
for
she's
him-
useful.
Yeah, pretty much.
Gee, well, hold on. We can't
Okay.
write off Deanna Troi
the
as
other one
not
was
being
okay.
useful.
the other one was sleeping with two of her
No,
co-mates.
hold on. We can't use the word useful and not talk about how useful Deanna Troi was every time Picard needed to be like,
fuel
mute the
problems.
screen for a second. What is that guy thinking?
Well, she can't read their thoughts; she can read their emotions.
Right, but that
My
came in handy.
God, that a good poker player can do that.
No, but she was very good at allowing the crew
The obvious
to
to be stated.
wow, there's a lot of hate for Deanna Troi here. I don't like her as a character, but come on, she was very useful.
Yeah,
When she was
as eye
drunk.
candy on the bridge.
See, I don't see her as eye candy at all. Matt, do you hate her too?
No, she was actually one of my favorite characters in that whole series, and I don't even feel like talking right now.
You're a terrible person.
What is the hate for Deanna Troi?
I don't get it.
I mean, when you're a Beta Z, that is a one up is to have one of them on your crew. Yeah, her mom was annoying as all get out, although good.
Yeah, but she was also Nurse Chapel.
Right, I understand, and obviously, big time connections to the whole thing.
She was also the computer.
Right, and the computer. So,
Her best role yet.
but I don't know. I mean, as annoying as storylines at times were with Riker, and some other things, like she's very useful to have on your crew compared to Uhura, who just basically was the definition of communications person only. Although I guess in the reboot, maybe you could make an argument for the new character, but this is just the classic series, so we can't go there. Matt, defend Deanna Troi. I'm doing a bad job of it.
Yeah, I don't know. Well, I personally, the opposite of the Crusher Picard love interest, I liked Riker Deanna. Like,
See, that I did like. That I'll give you.
I think that was well executed, and it was, and whenever there was a step forward or a step backward, I felt like it was actually, a real story, not just like, well, that's what we're doing this week. And I don't know, I like empaths as an idea. Like, I think that's a fun concept. I don't think it gets enough time in fiction, so adding it as a a character that's usually on the bridge is great.
Would you rather have a communications person that's strictly going to give you communication, or a communication that also can read those feelings, etc.? Like, it's the same person, but then she has an advantage to me. This is no contest.
Well, I mean, if you're going strictly from a useful point of view of what was shown on screen between the two series, then I think it's no contest. But that's not what we're doing here necessarily. I mean, there's more to it. And, you know, Troy had the largest wardrobe of anyone on the D. Like, she had two different, like, I don't know, yoga outfits. She had that awesome dress, the blue one. Then she had her dressy uniform that wasn't the dress uniform.
Space cheerleader. That's all I'm saying.
So you guys are going for the bland Lieutenant Uhura?
She may be bland, but she's got tech skills. What can you do, Deanna? You don't even have a console in front of you.
She doesn't need one.
She doesn't need one.
All right, so are we going to have a split category on this? Steve, are you voting for the original series on this?
As useful, I mean, they both have their different uses, but I'm going to have to vote TNG on this one, I think.
Oh. All right. Dot, are you going the original series?
That's right.
That's right. All right, you're the only one.
I like Uhura. I'm progressive.
I like Uhura too. I just like Deanna more.
That's where I don't necessarily like either one, but if I had to pick one that's going to be on my crew, it's going to be Troy. She's more helpful to me.
I'd put Dax.
Oh God.
Yeah, yeah. You know what? Dax should be in this because arguably she at least has cool tech skills and has generations of experience.
True. We couldn't put everybody. We had a lot of other people we could have put in. Not room for everybody, including this other one who I have down as Category 8. Who's a better number one bridge officer, William Riker, or the one that didn't exist for the original series? Now, I know a lot of people would say this is where we could have had Spock versus Riker as the second in command type thing, but really there's no comparison for Riker in the original series. If anything, Kirk is a closer comparison to Riker than he is to Picard, in my opinion, as far as like a personality, age, all the different traits that go into it. Kirk and Riker are more similar, and Picard's almost like the dad.
Picard's almost of a league of his own, whereas Riker is, well, for one, his idol was Captain Kirk.
Right.
Which is shown on numerous occasions. Plus, he's got that same kind of grittiness and kind of gamble, and kind of, the way that he carries himself is almost like Kirk, but it's more refined.
And we couldn't compare him to Kirk because that was already going to be Picard, and I didn't want to compare him to Spock because we already had Data, so I really didn't have anybody to compare Riker to, but I at least wanted to acknowledge that he existed. Birdman, is there anybody I should have put him against?
You could argue Chakotay from Voyager.
That would not fit this debate.
The original series, though, there's really nobody.
Yeah, I'm trying to think here from the original series. Well, what if we looked at the movies? Is there anybody even in there?
I don't really remember anybody that could compare to that.
Kirstie Alley.
Nobody. I mean, Decker.
Kirstie Alley. There we go. So that would have been an unfair advantage, and Next Generation would have got a slam dunk on this one.
But she was in Cheers. Sorry.
Does his existence give? I mean, this isn't a category, so to speak, but does his existence in the Next Generation give a point towards that series in general as a character type that we didn't have in the original series?
I would almost argue so, even though I don't want to, just for the fact that they had the same amount of cast, the 7, and then if you count Wesley, it's 8, but I try not to. But it seems like the Next Generation crew made more use of their cast, of their 7, whereas the original series did not.
It could have been an amount of episodes thing, though, because
I get that too, but I think that also a lot of it evolved when Roddenberry was no longer involved with the series.
Right, when Berman kind of takes the helms.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's just for fun. I just wanted to at least acknowledge that Riker exists, so we don't seem silly for not having him involved in this debate somehow, even though we're not comparing him against anybody. Moving away from the actual crews a little bit, obviously both series deal with a variety of alien species, enemies, et cetera, et cetera. There was a couple pretty significant ones, though, that exist in both that I wanted to compare here. So we're comparing the old versions, the original series versions of these guys, to the next generation versions, and we're talking about Klingons and Romulans because they are probably the two most prominent ones that exist in both. Do we like the old Klingons and the old Romulans better, or the newer Klingons and Romulans going when it comes to these two series? Matt, how do you start comparing these two, or does Klingons go one way and Romulans go the other way?
Well, you got a good point. I don't know. I feel like they were fleshed out a lot more in Next Generation. That might be because there was more time and all of that.
They definitely looked cooler in the Next Generation.
That's a budget thing, though. That's hard to compare. But at the same time, the Klingons in the original series had that storyline of they look so much like humans, they can blend in. And I can't think of a parallel to the Next Generation. And I like that story sometimes.
Humans dressed up like Klingons.
Yeah. I mean, the humans could always just graft things to their faces and do things like that. But
they were like, "Hey, Worf, dress up like a Klingon."
What?
Nothing. Continue.
Jeez. I don't know. I got nothing.
Worf, look like a man.
Birdman, how do we start trying to compare these two?
I felt the Romulans were more effective in the new series. They're more of a subtle threat. Mm-hmm. Whereas in the original series, in my opinion, they were a whole lot of who gives a fuck. Whereas the Klingons in the old series, they were more of a military threat, and they are still very much a military threat in the Next Generation. But you can negotiate with these ones. There are ones who want to talk.
For me, I might go to what he was saying, and obviously there's more episodes, so it's easier probably to flesh out these races in the Next Generation. But to me, the Romulans, if we're comparing the two, are a closer comparison between the original series and the Next Generation. I can't separate them as much. Whereas the Klingons, the storylines that they did with the Klingons in the Next Generation, and maybe it's an unfair advantage since you have a Klingon as part of your crew and all the different things you can do involving Worf, but those are some of my favorite episodes of the Next Generation, are the ones including the different Klingon relationships and power struggles, etc. So I can't necessarily say a clear-cut winner in Romulans, but for me, I like the Next Generation Klingons way better than the original series. Steve, what do you think?
I like them for different reasons. I like the Romulans. Just I like their style and how they look better in the original series. Better, although they are more militant in the future. Thinking that they're better than everybody else. Whereas the Klingons still do, but they uphold their honor. And whereas in the original, it doesn't seem like they had an honor system. It was more of just, you effed with me, I'll come after you. But I have to argue also that the Klingons look cooler in the 24th century, and they just there's a lot more going for them. So kind of tears it for me.
Does anybody want to make an argument before we try to get votes for either side?
Well, speaking on the honor code thing, you would hear half of the Klingons in Next Generation talk about honor, and then the other half just ignore it entirely. That was a constant thing of, that guy's got no honor. It's yeah, and he's winning right now.
Right.
That happened a lot.
I don't know. My vote only, like I said, not for the Romulan standpoint, because I think it's almost a wash or it's too close to call, but for Klingons, it swayed me to vote for Next Generation in this category overall. Birdman, what do you think?
Honestly, I'm going to have to go with the new kind of generations, simply more or less because of the Romulans.
Okay.
Because, like I said, they're a more subtle threat. They've infiltrated the Federation deep. They could literally be anywhere at any time.
It wasn't even more of a subtle threat, but it was a more subtle threat, but also a more serious threat.
Yeah, I mean, their ships are massive. Their spy network is unparalleled. Right. I mean, the Romulans, honestly, they're pretty badass. Whereas in the original series, Ooh, cloaking device. I don't know. Although, like I said, Klingons in the original series, they were a pretty big threat to the Federation. Now, not so much. But yeah, I'm going to give my vote right now. I'm saying new.
All right, Matt, what do you think? Go ahead.
Didn't the classic Romulans used to have like a giant bird painted on the hull of their ship?
Yeah.
Like,
Then
So
they
did the
smart
Klingons
ones.
to begin with.
you gotta give them points for that shit, right? Like,
Is it
all we
enough
need
points
is
for you to cast your vote for the original series?
giant bird and maybe give them a space mullet, and they could like mud in the space. I'd be down. I'm gonna give it to Next Generation for all the things Birdman said.
All right, Steve.
I'm gonna have to go Next Generation just because the sheer amount of ships, the coolness to them, the Klingons. I mean, overall, it's just a better pick.
All right, so a clean sweep for the Next Generation, which brings us to our halfway point and category number 10 here. Looking away from people for a minute, we've compared the ships, but let's get right down to it. For the most part, most of the action took place on the bridge. Which show had the cooler bridge? I know there's different versions of them, and you can break them down however you'd like to, but what show has a better bridge, Steve?
Now, does it have to be the original series bridge, or can it be one of the original series movies bridges?
Either. I say technically we're going up the series against the series.
Okay.
So maybe we should stick with that.
Okay. Because it's even then it's still a hard choice between choosing film to film.
Look at it this way. Which bridge would you rather spend sitting for 8 hours on? Which is more comfortable?
You
Well,
can't
that's an
really
easy
sit on
choice.
the Next Generation one unless you're one of the senior most crew members.
Well, actually, that's not entirely true. Those cabinets underneath all the terminals and the sides and in the back, they actually pull out as seats.
Interesting.
And it's a hell of a lot brighter, so you wouldn't need glasses for eye strain. So I think I'm going to have to go to Next Generation just because the bridge just looks more comforting, more relaxed.
And there's more than one way out.
Yeah.
It also just looks more intimidating. Like if you get on the view screen and you're about to like have some type of interaction with one, if you view the view screen comes up and it's the original series bridge, you're like, what is this hodgepodge? I'm not afraid of this. If the Next Generation one comes up, you're like, dang, son, these guys are serious. Like, I'm not messing with these guys.
Screwed.
Yeah, so I agree with you guys. I'd be going with the Next Generation bridge as the one I would prefer to be a part of. What about you, Birdman?
Yeah, definitely. Because once again, if you look at the bridge from the original series, there's one way on that bridge and one way off. So I don't know how you'd even get to the bathroom. Where's the bathroom on this thing?
Well, it's on deck 17.
Also, this one gave you quick access to
the captain's ready room.
the captain's ready room.
Well, on the other side, it is the bathroom.
Okay, that and there's more like you. It seems to be on the Next Generation bridge. You have got a lot more customability. Plus, you can run the entire ship from the bridge. You can run engineering from there. It just seems like there's more control options on the Next Generation. Plus, those chairs look really comfortable. You can adjust everything on the original bridge. Those don't look like adjustable chairs.
And more stuff happened on the Next Generation bridge.
Yeah,
As far as like other characters outside of the crew showing up.
Yeah,
Q,
plus
the board.
Exactly. All sorts of crazy crap happened on that bridge. Plus, you've got that wonderful skylight looking into space.
Right.
Crack it with a hammer.
Yeah.
They all die.
All right, so a clean sweep on category 10, sticking with objects and things like that. It's category 11, we're going to move into just weapons in general. Now, you can look at this as phasers. You can look at this as the actual Enterprise weapons. You can look at this as the villains' weapons that they came across. Just overall, if you're going to watch the entire series of both shows, which one features cooler weapons?
I like the phaser rifle from the new series, but the original one looks so sci-fi as to be really stupidly badass. Because it looks like the ultimate giant phaser ray gun.
Right.
But the weapons of that era were, because they were more primitive in some ways, they were more disruptive. I mean, think about the Klingon blaster from Star Trek 3. When it just disintegrated people.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want to be shot by that. Fuck disruptors. Whereas in the Next Generation, phaser and disruptor hits are more survivable. They're almost a little bit more civilized.
Well, that's because the 90s hit and they had a different government
Set the phasers
control.
Stun.
In the 60s, you could kill people.
Now, are we also including starship weapons in here
Yep.
as well? In that case, the Next Generation quantum torpedoes. Enough said. If we're also going to talk about weapons, we can also talk about armor. A blade of armor, which Janeway brought back from the future. But if we're talking strictly Next Generation, because that would be technically in that timeline, if you really want to stretch it out, because she was back in Nemesis, so the technology's there. Trying to think of other big-ass weapons.
Well, you have think about it this way. You have the tractor beams
Yep.
that are more advanced. You have the deflector dish. You have, the tachyon pulses. You have the Borg cubes that
The
are
nanite weapons.
the nanites. Yep. You have the ability to adapt. And,
What about-
and prevent?
Oh, so I mean, I think it's going to be pretty obvious since the Next Generation is so much further into the future that the technology, et cetera, is going to be there to allow for better technologically sound weaponry, et cetera. But what if you're going about just how each series used weaponry, weapons?
You could argue the original series was more brutal because of things like the Doomsday Machine. You never saw a planet killer on a scale outside of a Borg cube in the Next Generation, at least. Well, maybe that Tin Man thing if it turned evil, but yeah, because the original series had a lot more, like I said, brutal weaponry when you really think about it. Plus, there were a lot of blades used in the original series, if I remember correct. I remember a lot of stabbing. So
Caesar.
I don't know. It's hard. I would not want to get shanked in the 23rd century, but I sure as hell don't want to get shot in the 24th. So,
Matt, what do you think?
Wasn't it against? Didn't Kirk make a piecemeal blunderbuss when he was fighting like a Gorn or something like that once?
Oh, yeah, I forgot about that.
We gotta count that weapon because that was awesome.
That's
Found
true.
like explosive crystals and jammed him down a bamboo chute and shot a dude.
That's
Yep,
true.
Picard never did that.
You just turned Data into a weapon.
I don't know. I think the classic standard issue phaser, like I like that the original series it looked like a gun, whereas the other one it looked like I don't know, could have been a
A hand
scanning
mixer?
device.
Or remote
It could
control.
have it could have been anything. And I guess that's probably a possible thing in the future that
think
not
it's
all
like
guns are
video
gonna
game
look like
control.
guns, but like I don't know. I like the pistol aspect of the old one.
So is your vote for the original series, Matt?
I don't know. I don't know what else vote.
Steve, what do you think? How are we going in this? Which series used the weapons better? Which series had better weapons? How do you want to go there?
Well, I do like the styles of some of the original series stuff. I think I'm going to have to go TNG on this one just because of the technological advancements. And, although I don't like their hand phasers in the 24th century compared to the 23rd century, I do agree on the same thing as the rifles with Dodd there, that the original series ones look like dog snot compared to the TNG ones. But I just think overall it's a hands down TNG. You have the original series. Not only were they brutal with their weapons, but they use their phasers from the Enterprise to light a friggin' mountain. Torch it. But
Birdman, agree or disagree?
I agree.
Matt, back to you.
Yeah, I'll give it to TNG. Although the homemade blunderbuss is a major points.
All right, that makes it 3 clean sweeps in a row for the Next Generation. Let's see what happens as we get back into some people. We've talked about the crews, but we talked about some of the races. We didn't get into specific villains. So which series had the best villains? We had people like Gorn, General Chang, Khan, Commander Cruz, Harry Mudd in the original series, and a bunch more that I'm sure all you guys will mention as we discuss this. Some of the main ones you might think of for the Next Generation: Arbus, that's the character that killed Tasha Yar. Star, you have the Borg Queen, you have Q. He may be enough to win this category alone. The Duras sisters, as far as Klingons go, Lore, Data's brother. Which series did you like the villains in better, Birdman?
TNG, I felt they were more memorable. I mean, out of the original series, I can name General Chang, the Gorn, Khan, Mudd, and Tremaine. You ask me who I can name out of TNG, I can rattle off like 10.
And the other thing is, we are somewhat cheating here because the villains we're coming up with for the original series are technically from the movies mostly.
Yeah.
Well, the only one that's not is the Gorn, Khan, and Harry Mudd.
And the Gorn was only one dude.
I know.
Who got
it was one
killed by a
episode.
homemade blunderbuss.
Keep going with your thoughts. So you can name more for the next generation. Does that make it a surefire thing for them?
I think it does. Plus the fact that the villains outside, like, I think the villains in TNG are more, they seem more like a galactic threat. The Klingons are a regional thing. You look at the Borg, something like that could consume the Milky Way conceivably. Like, they ate everything.
Things. The Borg could come at you out of nowhere and seemingly had no limits to their reach. And Q really didn't seem to have a lot of limits to his reach either.
Not until Voyager, anyway.
Yeah.
But that was what's so great about Q is that, like, he was clearly the first villain they ever fought, but ultimately he was rooting for humanity. Like, if it wasn't for Q, there was no way the Federation was ever going to be prepared for the Borg. True. Like, him throwing the Enterprise at the Borg way before they would have ever encountered them is what allowed them to start their research and everything. That allowed them to fight. Yeah. Like, and just think of, like, if you were to take these and switch them, right? Like, Khan versus like, Picard. Like, he got duped by Kirk, so how easily would he get duped by Picard? But then, like, Q versus Kirk? I think that would have made for an interesting story.
Well, they would have been battling each other with sarcastic remarks.
Q would have just been having fun with him.
Yeah.
And Kirk would, too.
I don't know.
I don't think Kirk would have outsmarted Q.
No,
he wouldn't have outsmarted him, but he would have gambled in the right way to piss him off and make him leave.
He would have Rikered him.
Yeah.
So, Matt, is your vote for TNG?
Yeah, I don't think it's really comparable.
Steve, you have two votes going TNG. Are you going to be dissenting among them?
I mean, I think ultimately the original series only had actually two real villains in Khan and Chang. But again, the only recurring villain that the original series had was Khan. I mean, you could argue races of people, but I mean, Harry Mudd's not really a threat, and then you have, I mean, Khan's really the only threat, and he was only in one episode of the show and one movie. I mean, that's you look at TNG. I mean, the Borg are in half the series after season 2 or 3. You have the Duras sisters, which are a pain in the ass. You have Lore, which shows up 10 times, and then you have Q that shows up 8. So, and he's there at the beginning and the end of the series.
Right.
So, I mean, I would say overall that the originals or that the Next Generation wins it hands down.
All right, fair enough. Getting back away from the people then for a little while, basically for the rest of the time here. And this one you do not have to look at specifically just one crew versus the other crew. Looking at the series as a whole, which series had the better style, the better uniforms, the better clothing, the better outfits for either alien races, you can talk about the actual crew uniforms, which one you liked better, just overall, which series had better clothing. I know this seems like a weird thing for us to be comparing, but we're trying to break these down in any way possible. Birdman, what do you think? How do we break down the clothing?
How quickly can you get it off if you got to go to the bathroom or you want to get some nookie? That's how I break it down.
That's
not good for TNG.
Honestly, the original series uniforms, I like how simple they are. The problem is telling ranks. It's a little too much effort because you have to memorize it, in my opinion.
Well,
yes,
not only that, but it's like, here, let me see your arm.
Yes, please show me your wrist, fine sir. Whereas, look at my chest or look at my arms. At least I can make it look like I'm looking at your eyes. Functionally, I think the TNG uniforms look better from a military standpoint, because I think it's easier to identify officers.
Their pants were cool down by the shoes. Sorry.
Yeah. although the original series, like I said, they would seem more comfortable. Like you could maybe get a uniform an extra size too like big so you can fit into it. Whereas the next generation, man, you better hope you look good naked. Because it hugs in all the wrong places.
It was actually very distracting, oftentimes seeing Picard pull his uniform down because it was starting to ride up in spot. Yeah, like that got a little tedious at times.
Like, well, he goes, "It's riding my crack, number one."
So you'd rather wear the ones from the original series, but you like the ones from the next generation better? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, although I do like the later TNG era when they get, as I call them, the corduroy uniforms.
Yes, I like those as well.
But I do like the later versions where they were still they were still colored, but they weren't as jumpsuity spandex, I guess. Like
the ones with the collars?
Yeah. Those I liked the best, but corduroys would be a second.
All right,
Am I the only one who really hated when the captain had like the jacket with the leather shoulders and the gray undershirt?
That was Pimp Picard.
Oh, I hated that outfit so much.
Kirk pulled that one once too, but he had the green shirt.
Oh no, I liked that when he had like the green open chest shirt. Like I liked that Kirk, and I hated gray shirt Picard. I don't know.
I hated gray shirt Picard as well. I liked the green shirt Kirk, but
green shirt Kirk looked like he spilled pea soup all over himself. I hated the color.
Well, if you were talking movies, I would say the original series and the Next Generation would be tied as far as, because I like the red jumpsuits and the Next Generation corduroy clothes, but again, I'd probably still go with the original series for that. But I think even for the regular uniforms, I'm going the original series just because it's simpler and, you know, they need to take their damn shirt off. They can just take their damn shirt off. They don't have to, like, number one, unzip me.
Good point.
Now, here's a question for the panel here.
How do I put my pants on?
Who had the most comfortable casual clothes? I mean, really,
well, the Next Generation, because they actually had clothes.
Whereas the original series had jumpsuits. Everybody in the future has jumpsuits. I think in the future, obviously you had a lot more options. Although there were certain races I thought had better, like I like the older style Klingon uniforms. I know I'm weird, because the newer ones look like they'd be very smelly and uncomfortable with all the body armor and spikes. Whereas the other original ones, they look okay. Kind
of like the Romulans, you know, they look like they're completely uncomfortable wearing the padded shoulders.
They look, see, when I look at a Romulan from the Next Generation, I feel like they'd feel to the touch like the inside of a pizza delivery bag.
Like, it does look like that. Like they're fuzzy and they poke you.
That is like, awkwardly accurate.
Like, I just want to walk up to him like, I'm sorry, sub-commander, whatever the hell your name is. Can I just touch you for a minute? I'm just really curious.
Picard walks up. It is static electricity.
Fascinating. Mr. Data, come here. But yeah, so I'm going for the Next Generation.
Matt, that means you're the only vote I need here. Which clothing would you prefer? Which one do you like better?
Well, I like what Steve said earlier about if you were comparing the movies, because I feel like just the uniforms and the jackets from Wrath of Khan were some of the coolest costume design in any Star Trek ever.
Oh, yeah, easily.
Yeah.
They look so good. So I'm going to go with the original, and I know we're not doing movies, but I like the original outfits. Like, if you were to load up my Star Trek Online account, if you could ever find it, like, all of my crew were in original uniforms.
All right, fair
enough. Which you actually had to pay for, which was stupid.
Then in uniforms, we have a split 2-2, 2 for the Next Generation, 2 for the original series. Our first tie in as amongst the category goes. See how that plays in effect later on. Going into category 14, you can compare the theme song, you can compare the underlying themes, the different musical scores. Which series did music better, Birdman?
TNG, beyond the shadow of a doubt. However, that being said, the original theme is more iconic, and a lot of people recognize all those Star Trek sound effects because they're kind of part of the pop culture. Identity's not the word, but kind of the nerd social fabric. Like, you know what a phaser is, you know what a photon torpedo is. With Star Trek The Next Generation, yeah, it's got really good sound design, but
I agree with that point. I don't necessarily agree that the original series has the more iconic theme song, though.
I don't know. If you were to pull people on the street, they'd be able to tell you, especially with that.
I think more people these days would be confused if you're taken outside of the geek circles.
Well, the funny thing is the original series theme, they reincorporated, and all they did was just add a little bit to the end and threw it into the new rebooted films.
I don't know. I
So
just feel like if you took just a general person and played both themes, I think more people would identify the Next Generation theme song before they could figure out what the heck was going on with that original one. But maybe that's just me.
But
If
I
you
think it would
played
also
30
depend on
seconds.
if they saw the rebooted films, because if they saw the rebooted films, then
That's in
it's the
there.
same theme.
Yeah. Next
Also-
Generation is the better theme, though.
I
Like, I think
I
that's
like the original.
down.
What do you say, Matt?
But like, what if they're Tenacious D fans? Because Tenacious D plays the original Star Trek with its completed lyrics every concert.
That's true.
Have you guys heard that version?
No, but it sounds interesting.
Thankfully not.
Oh, I'll put a link so that you can put it in the show notes because it's worth seeing for everybody ever.
And we just lost our viewership.
Stop
Ouch.
hating on it. Don't hate on the D.
I like the D. I just don't want lyrics to that song because it's
Oh.
so good.
it's like singing the X-Men theme song.
Matt,
Sorry.
who has the better
comes
theme and
Wolverine.
who used music better throughout the series?
Well, I don't know. I feel like I can't fairly judge this category because when I hear just the first, 3 or 4 seconds of Next Generation, I'm like 5 again.
Yep.
And it's like that was what I grew up with and that's what it's going to be. Like, I like both themes. I really do.
I don't dislike both themes, but the original series one gets on my nerves faster than the Next Generation one does. Like, I can just listen to the Next Generation theme in the background, like on a somewhat softer tone, and just be like, yeah, this is awesome. Where the original series, eventually I'm going to be like, stop that. Fingernails on that chalkboard, please stop.
See, I enjoyed it. I like all Star Trek themes, like from, well, other than the Enterprise, because
I hate Enterprise.
What was that
I
doing?
like that theme.
We have now concluded that Birdman has terrible theme song. No, I'm just kidding. Totally kidding. Matt, where's your vote going on the music?
Next Generation, but that's only nostalgia.
Fair enough. Steve?
Well, the funny thing about the Next Generation is actually it's part of the motion picture theme, like part of it.
Okay.
But anyways, I'm going TNG. I just prefer the theme and the ship sounds instead of hearing whoosh, I hear as it goes past, and I know it's something minute and stupid, but plus it just the tune to it is better, and you have, instead of space, the final frontier, it's these are the voyages of the Starship Enterprise. So I mean, it's just, I don't know, it's more fun.
Good point. All right, now for a category that I completely need your guys' help on because I know nothing about it. Which franchises had the better games? You can talk about board games, card games, video games, arcade games, however, which way you want to go with this. Which franchise has produced better games?
Where do we even start with this one?
They have good games.
There have been some good games. I mean, I can even talk about some of the role-playing game stuff done by FASA, Last Unicorn, and Decipher. I think arguably the best one was probably the Decipher one, although FASA did put together a pretty good board game for the original series. There was actually even a Starship Battles miniatures game, very similar to Star Wars Empire, that's out right now. It's like that little X-Wing game. There were a number of really good Star Trek original games that came out on the PC in the 90s. There's like Starfleet Academy. I think it was called Star Trek Command. They were done by Interplay, and like I said, I think from 1997, 98 to probably about 2003, 2004. They were really good, set in the original kind of universe. You could play as the Romulans, the Gorn, the Klingon, the Federation. They were really, really cool. There were games on the Next Generation, like Star Trek Federation, really good game. There was Federation 2, I think it was. I can't remember. I reviewed one on my show like a year and a half ago. There was also Star Trek Elite Force, which is more Voyager, but still set in the TNG era timeline. There was a couple games on the Genesis. There was a couple games on the Super Nintendo. There were games on the NES. I would argue that the better ones were the original series because I think then you could explore the lore a little bit more than the TV series could, and you could really expand upon it, and you could mod them. Because I remember playing Starfleet Command, modding the crap out of my ships. I could have Starfleet Marines board Klingon ships, and that was so cool. Although some of the later TNG games did start to get it right, but I haven't played one that's truly great. There was one that came out for the 360 a couple of years ago. Or, sorry, not a couple of years ago. Probably about 8 years ago now. I can't remember what the hell it was called. But it wasn't bad. Someone else.
I'm
going on for hours.
I've never played a Next Generation game. I remember renting or getting from somebody or something one of the original series games, and it had to be either for the Nintendo, the Super Nintendo, possibly the Nintendo 64, but it was one of those early, first couple generations of the Nintendo games systems. And all I remember is that the game was freaking impossible. I remember being Kirk, and then you had like your away team, which you could pick, I believe, certain members to join you.
Are you talking about the one where you get onto the planet and you get stuck in the cave?
Yeah.
I still have that one, the 25th anniversary game.
All I remember is it being hard as hell.
Blue Label, right?
Yep.
And I just couldn't figure out what the heck I was supposed to do. It was like one of those where you had to get one thing in order to do something else, in order to do something else.
Yeah, it was a pain in the ass.
Even the controls were difficult on it.
It was not a very good port, 'cause I think that was a port of the Apple II version.
Okay.
Or the one for the Mac, anyway.
That is the limit of my Star Trek gaming experiences. Steve, you've played a few games, though, right?
I've played some on where you just command the ships. I've played them all the way back to when they were like DOS games.
Okay.
And various incarnations of that as well.
Is it true that the computer has had better Star Trek games than like the actual
consoles?
By
far and away.
Yeah, I would definitely say so. The console versions pale in comparison usually. I've had a few that have been entertaining for about an hour, and the PC I'm at least able to keep entertained for a few until they get too difficult to continue.
Which games have you had the most enjoyment from, Steve?
Like I've played Star Trek Online. That's one of it's halfway decent. I wouldn't say that it's perfect or anything. I enjoyed back in the day the 25th anniversary game until I got stuck in that cave. Because I did figure it out pretty well. I just once I got in that cave, I was screwed. And I guess there's a lot of episodes to that game.
Mm-hmm.
Once you get past that point, but I never did. And DOS is dead, so can't play it anymore. Don't know why I still have the disc. I've also played not necessarily on the computer. I've played like the HeroClix board games.
Okay.
Of the original series and like the Federation versus the Klingons, and it's actually quite fun.
Matt, what's your gaming experience when it comes to the Star Trek franchise? Have you played any of the Star Trek games?
Maybe a dozen of them. Like I know I've played at least a little bit of Bridge Commander. I played Ship Creator. I mentioned earlier I played the MMO. I played Starfleet Command 1 and 3. I played whatever that ground-based RTS was that was really bad.
Oh man, I was waiting for someone to mention that.
I still have my disc somewhere, and I bet I could find it in 5 minutes if I needed it, but I would never need it. Like that thing was glitchy, even patched up, years later, to the point of being unplayable.
What about any gaming experience outside of video games with Star Trek? Does anybody have any?
Oh God, the role-playing games. As you guys know, I'm a huge tabletop gamer, I do. I do. TheseWarriors.com. There's my one shameless plug.
There'll be more, guys.
For me, I'd say I like. There have been different games for the various franchises. I mean, back in the mid '90s, there was a company called Last Unicorn, and they produced games for the original series, TNG, DS9. There was a Voyager one, but it got canceled because the company lost the license or they went out of business or something. And there was ones in the later 2000s done by Decipher, I think it was.
Yep.
And those ones I didn't mind, although I like FASA's rules. Those were the early ones in the early to mid 80s, and it came in a box set. And I've always just liked how FASA's rules, they're really easy and quick to kind of learn. I mean, kind of like Shadowrun. If you're familiar with that particular role-playing system. Now, I don't recall what system they use for that, but I do like the box art for it. I'm trying to think here if there's anything superior about any of the other non-video gamey stuff. There is a Starship battle game, which is, like I said, is played very similar to Star Wars Rebels or Empire, whatever the hell it is right now, and that's a lot of fun, and that's classic TNG. That makes no sense. And that's classic series stuff, and that's a lot of fun. I think a lot of classic RPG for the classic series can be a lot of fun because your imagination has to do more because you don't have all the giant. You almost have too much when you involve the stuff from TNG forward with the kind of role playing stuff. Because, like you said, you can put in the Borg, you can put in the Ferengi, and all this other stuff. And if you're not a decent game master and storyteller, you can lose the storyline in the details. Like, you transport to this and Starbase 83 and the Ferengi, whatever. Whereas with the classic series, I find the story came first because you had a limited tool set. So I found you had to work a little bit harder. Now, that's a debatable point because you could make the same argument for TNG from a purely role-playing standpoint. But I would say classic series is a little bit better on that side of gaming because I think they treat the franchises as a little bit better because it is so beloved. But one of the things that no one talks about, and this is a video game, there were two of these that we haven't brought up. There's one called Borg Assimilator, which is essentially a torture device. You grip a stick and it gives you this electric shock. It's like you're being assimilated and you have to hold on for as long as you can. And the other one was an Elite Forces phaser rifle light gun game that was in the arcades.
Wow.
That was pretty friggin' cool. But overall, if I had to say classic series wins here, because I think the era forced you to be more creative, and the video games were treated better.
Fair enough. Matt, what do you think as far as overall games go? Which franchise do you think has the better selection?
Well, I feel like it's unfair as far as my vote because my friends would never play the card games with me, and though I've had a regular RP group all my life, they're all like, well, we'll do D&D, but Star Trek RP is too nerdy. So I haven't had too much experience. Yeah.
I think it's the opposite.
I have very interesting friends, let's say. So I never got to experience anything but the video games, and I don't know, I feel like the next generation video games, since it was closer to the video game era, were treated better. So I'm going to say next generation, though I probably would have more fun playing the other ones.
Steve, what do you think?
I'm going to go...
We have one vote for each.
I'm going TNG.
All right. 2 votes for TNG. I will simply revert back to the fact that, first of all, I know Birdman plays a shit ton of games, and he voted for the original series. And second, the only game I've ever played for any of them was the original series. So even though it was hard as crap, frustrating, and not very rewarding, I will cast my vote for the original series, which makes it another tie. All right, moving on to the 16th category. We're almost done, folks. Only a few more to go. 16th category, we can't break down the series without breaking down the movies that came from the series. So this is our one chance to really delve into the movies a little bit. Which franchises had the better overall movies? Obviously, for the original, we have the motion picture, The Wrath of Khan, The Search for Spock, The Voyage Home, The Final Frontier, The Undiscovered Country, and I guess you could then think about the recent reboot. And for the next generation, you have Generations, First Contact, Insurrection, and Nemesis. Matt, how do you break down the movies for each franchise?
Well, I think with TNG, everyone has their opinions. I think with the original series, everyone has the same opinion, which is that half of them are bad. That said, I think in a lot of respects, some of the older series movies are more known than the older series, but that might just be a time factor since, I was, born after almost every one of the movies were done for the original series. And the series had been off the air for 20 years.
Yeah, I do think you're right, though. There's usually more of a universal accepted opinion about with the original series that this movie's bad, this movie's good, this movie's bad, this movie's good. Whereas the Next Generation movies, there's a lot of back and forth. A lot of people will like a certain movie, and a lot of people will hate a certain movie. Birdman, what do you think about the movie franchises of each one?
I think, arguably, and this is obviously my opinion, with TNG, the one everybody says is awesome is First Contact, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
When you ask people what's the best original series movies, you get a bunch of different opinions because they're frankly better. Wrath of Khan is a film classic, and that's a movie that's a movie I actually call a film, not a movie. And that meant that to me, it means it's a step above your average popcorn flick. You get such a great chemistry in almost every single movie because that cast is so good together. I mean, Voyage Home is the Star Trek movie for non-Star Trek people. It draws people in. You don't need to know sweet and crap all about Star Trek. And it's still fun. Nuclear vessels, transparent aluminum, double dumbass on you.
Oh, man. There's some... Okay, I know some people really hate certain Next Generation films, but overall, I enjoy all of the Next Generation films to different levels. I even enjoy Insurrection.
They're terrible.
Maybe at a different level, but I enjoy them all, whereas there is some of the original series movies that are just awful.
The first one is what they originally used for torture in Guantanamo Bay.
And that's not the only awful one amongst them.
Come on. Final Frontier is goofy because what does God need with a starship?
That's one of the worst movies ever.
Why does Shatner?
Uhura dancing in the desert should just be an animated GIF somewhere. Because it's hilarious.
And you got Uhura actually doing something.
See?
Shake that ass.
If you include the reboots, I guess that's not fair, but since there hasn't been any reboots for the Next Generation yet,
Lord help them.
But I think the reboots are really good, no matter what everybody else says about them. I have really enjoyed both of the films so far in this new chapter of the original series. So that there's definitely more movies to pick from. So I guess even if you take the 3 or 4 shitty movies out from the original series, and you add the reboots in, you're still left with a bunch of good movies. So there's definitely more volume. I don't know, Steve. What do you think?
Was crap, though, man. Come on.
Which one?
In the Darkness was crap.
I disagree.
I agree.
Oh,
it was a cobbled together piece of shit that was.
We're not getting into that because
it had Captain RoboCop, so that I will give you.
We've gotten into that before. I will forever disagree with your guys' opinion on Into Darkness. But Steve, we haven't got your opinion overall. Which
being that that's a reboot, it doesn't count in this category. So, well, I would say that I have. I mean, 3 out of the 4 TNG films I enjoy. I will argue that First Contact is the best of the TNG, and I almost argue that Nemesis for some reasons and Generations for some reasons. Generations, the only good part about it is
the beginning
is Captain Kirk. That's just the whole movie for me.
And it's such a bitch way for the Enterprise to go out too.
Yeah, because Troy was at the controls.
The Enterprise was killed by Google Glass.
Yep.
It's
But
there's just as many moments from the Final Frontier in the motion picture.
Well, the motion picture was just a piece of shit anyway, and then you got to figure too that it came out after Star Wars, so they were competing.
Don't ever watch those two movies back to back. By the way, don't ever watch Star Trek: The Motion Picture and then any Star Wars film back to back. Or
the motion picture was just too damn long, and it was just. I couldn't tell, like, I couldn't even appreciate it barely until I got older, and even then I still don't like it.
I think Birdman does bring up a good point, though. If you were taking which movie out of all of them gets the best acclaim, Wrath of Khan is definitely set on a pedestal above any other Star Trek film that's ever been made.
I'll tell you why. Because it's because it was actually well written.
That usually helps.
Well, there was some gravity to it as well, because when Spock died, that was a game changer. Yeah. I mean, it's like...
Unlike films today where they don't actually kill any main character.
Yeah, and they get saved by magic blood. Sorry. I had to. I'm a horrible person.
You are. It's okay.
But the right guy said Khan in that film, in The Wrath of Khan.
Let's get into some more nitpicks on a new movie.
then, man, I'm not going to go.
Everybody knows our opinion of it. Anyways, but I think I enjoy more of the original series films overall. It's just I have more. For one, I grew up with them. I mean, not that I didn't grow up with TNG films, because I actually got to see all of those in theater. But I find that I enjoy Wrath of Khan, Search for Spock, Voyage Home, and Undiscovered Country. And for me, that because Wrath of Khan and Undiscovered Country are my top two in that whole. I mean, I like Voyage Home too, but those are my top two out of the series. I find that it trumps TNG in this category.
Fair enough. And Birdman, you're voting for the original series as well?
Absolutely. Like I said, just the original cast has better chemistry. Though my favorite Star Trek movie is First Contact, one movie doesn't make it the best.
Matt, what do you think?
I don't feel like it's as cut and dry for me as it is for everyone else. Like, I mean, I love all of the Next Generation movies. I don't know. Some of my earliest full-formed memories are about watching Insurrection on VHS in my parents' bedroom because I didn't have a VHS player when I rented it. Which is not a sentence you can say much anymore. But, like, I don't know. Wrath of Khan is iconic. Like, I think still today, if you hear the word Khan, everyone goes to that movie, even if they've never seen it, just for the quote.
That's true.
Well, the other thing, too, not to cut in, but the Wrath of Khan that was deep. Plus, it brought back a villain from the original series. And also, I find that the Undiscovered Country had gravitas as well because, for one, it didn't have to do with whales, but it had to do with or saving a species so they could stretch their faces. But the Undiscovered Country stopped interstellar war between the Klingon Empire and the Federation.
True.
I think
I didn't see where
that's my favorite, though.
Yeah. I think I need to rewatch the old ones personally, like all of them, just in order.
I can tell you which ones to skip.
That's what everyone says.
1 and 5.
I just did that, and man,
1 and 5. And
there's another one to skip in there too.
Which one?
Got it.
3.
There's so
I've
many.
heard a lot of bad things about 3.
3's hilarious. Come on, Doc Brown as a Klingon.
I actually don't mind that one as much as. Man, 1-5. I really don't like Undiscovered Country either. But I think of it this way: if you had to sit me down and say, I'm not going to tell you which one, but we're going to watch a Star Trek film from the classic series or a Star Trek Next Generation film, I'm always going to pick the Next Generation film. Or if you said you're going to have to watch all of them, 1 through 6 or 1 through 4, I'm going to pick the Next Generation films to watch 10 times out of 10. But if you were asking me, if we're comparing it to the series, I guess, and this is the way I'm going to cast my vote, the Next Generation films, I don't need them because the series was so good. Whereas for me, the original series movies are better than the series most of the time. Like, they add a lot more to the series. I know that's happening after the fact, but I mean, if you're looking at it as an overall franchise, they add so much more to that than the Next Generation films do. If that makes any sense whatsoever. It does in my head, so I'm going
No,
with that.
I'm gonna have to agree with you 100% because I feel like the Next Generation movies, at best, all they are is a longer episode.
It's like a
Like,
deleted scene on a film. It's like, oh, you love this series? Here, watch this little bonus.
yeah, it's like there's no some of them don't even have like the moral quandaries that were so huge in TNG. Some of them just feel like more action movie than
It's just we didn't get quite enough of that group, so let's see some more of them. Whereas to me, you can't take the original series movies out of the. If you take them out of the equation, then not as many people are still talking about the original series, in my opinion, because some of those movies meant a lot to a lot of people. So that's the reason I'm going to cast my vote for the original series, even though I would always watch the Next Generation films over them.
I'm 100% with you for exactly the same reasons.
All right, so that is a clean sweep for the original series when it comes to movies, and luckily we, for the most part, avoided any tirades and debates on the reboot. So that's a positive, that's a win. Going into the 17th category here, which franchise is the most quotable? Here's a fun one for you. So you got Khan, the scream there for the original series. Fascinating from Mr. Spock. Mr. Spock's all over the place. Live long and prosper. That's highly illogical. The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few or the one. He's dead, Jim, or damn it, Jim, or I'm a doctor, not a blank. Or Scotty. We talked about him earlier with I'm giving her
I'm giving her all she's got, Captain. Can I give her any more?
Next Generation, you have obviously the different call signs from Picard, engage or make it so. Resistance is futile from the Borg, shields up, red alert, things like that, which happen almost in every episode. To me, this one's pretty clear cut, but I'd like to get your guys' opinions when you look back at ones. Which one gave you more quotes that stuck in your mind, Birdman?
Without a doubt, the original series, because that cast sold it. And, they're like, I don't know, just it seems to me those classic Star Trek quotes are literally part of a geek social consciousness. Like, we just all know them. Once again, you can do the same thing for TNG, but I don't know. I look at the original series and I feel more towards them. Now, obviously, I love TNG with engage, make it so, obviously Worf's thing and the Borg thing. I don't know. I think the original series is infinitely more kind of quotable, and it resonates more. I really think it does. I mean, they mean more. With the TNG, not so much.
I don't know if I necessarily see it like that, but I definitely do see the original series as being more quotable. I think it might go into some stuff that we'll talk about in a little bit with the writing and stuff, whereas there was more engaging things for them to deal with in the Next Generation where they didn't need the quotes, maybe. I don't know. But the original series just has quote after quote after quote. Every character seems like they have a call, a quote most known for them, whether it be the way Kirk talks and gives him a bunch of quotes, Spock has quotes, Bones has quotes, Scotty has quotes. Everybody had quotes that they kind of went to, where you just didn't. That just wasn't part of the Next Generation, whether it be by design or just by happenstance. So that's why, for me, it's a sure thing for the original series. Matt, what do you think?
It's funny because I think inarguably the old series is more quoted in pop culture and things like that. But I think just in my personal group, who in the last 2 years we sat down and watched all of Next Generation and the movies.
Oh, without me?
Yeah, it was actually before Nate moved back up, so you and I weren't even talking at this point. And I think to that group, and I feel like the number one most quoted thing wasn't even something said in the show so much as an attitude from one episode, which was the one where Picard's negotiating the contract between the two races, and he was just a cocky bastard the whole time. And it's all like, what are we going to do? Last time we had 30 legislators. Well, this time you've got me. I'm the Picard, bitches. And it was just like, I'm the Picard bitches is probably the most quoted thing of that whole series. And he didn't even say that. He just kind of threw it out there.
Voting for the
I
Next
think
Generation?
it's no question. Oh, no, the original series. No question.
All right, so a roundabout way to vote for the original series. I like it. Steve, what do you think?
Well, I think it's pretty cut and dry here for me, but the original series just has a lot more quotable lines from every character because there were. I would say the films had more than the original series did itself. I mean, the original series had a lot of iconic lines that people were known for. You know, the "Beam me up, Scotty," the "I'm giving her all she's got," or I'm a doctor, not blah blah blah. But anyways, but I think the films added extra stuff to it as well. The double dumbass on you, or I've never trusted the Klingons, or whatever, the needs of the many. And you look at TNG, they do have things that are specific to each character as well. I would almost equate that to being a Roddenberryism, because the later series don't really have the same type thing as these two. And there are a few other ones that are on there for TNG as well, but I think overall I'd have to go with the original series here.
All right, so another clean sweep for the original series. So quotes are one thing, but what if we break it down to the actual writing on the show? Which series had better writers, had better stories, had better plots, had better things that they tackled in general? Which series is superior in that respect? Matt, why don't you start this one off?
Well, I feel like a lot of us are going to go in this category thinking, well, this is just entirely one-sided. But I think the one thing I want to say in the defense of the original series is that though almost every episode of Next Generation was great, like I can think of a couple of old series episodes that just stand out, and I can't think of very many episodes of the new series that stand out, and that might be because the old series had more bad in between the great ones, but like I can't think of an episode of Next Generation that really hits as hard as like, and let that be your last battlefield, with the Frank Gorshin and the red and black and the black, or the red and white, or the fucking black and white and white and black guys. Like, it's like he's black on the right side. Like, I don't know. Like, I think the writing in that episode, and there are a couple other ones, but I mean, some of them are just really stand out, and I don't feel like there's anything like that in the Next Generation. Though maybe on an episode-to-episode basis, it was probably better.
Yeah, I can see what you're saying with that. Birdman, what do you think on the writing overall for the series is?
I think there are some great questions that the Next Generation poses. I mean, one of my favorite episodes being Measure of a Man. Another one being, Inner Light, I think it is. That's season 4 episode. And there are some damn good TNG episodes, but when I think of episodes that changed attitudes in the decade they were produced, I think of Star Trek, the classic series. I really do. And honestly, it's weird because I honestly would probably go the other way if I had to go on impulse, but the classic series, it knocked it out of the park when it needed to.
If I had my own idea for a show, or my own idea for a franchise, or whatever it might be, and I got to pick one of the writing teams, either the writing team that worked on the original series or the writing team that worked on the Next Generation, I would not even hesitate in picking the Next Generation's writing team. The topics they tackled, the moral dilemmas that they went after, the way that they put in the science fiction fantasy world things that you could directly correlate with stuff that we were going through in real world stuff, just human issues in general, to me far exceeded what the original series ever was able to do. Whether it be the different stuff they did with Data and the human element, whether it be different things with Honor and different stuff like that with Worf, just the even more so what they did with it was in the different aliens or different species, different forms of life that they came into contact with, and how they use that to explore different parts of our own psyche and of our own, the human element. To me, this one's a slam dunk for the next generation. Steve, what do you think?
I'm just gonna have to go slam dunk Next Generation. It was just overall, it's better plots, better story, better writing, conversation, everything overall was just better in that category.
What do you think, Matt?
Well, I don't know. Birdman's got a really good point that the original series changed hearts and minds, and I don't know if that's because of the quality of the writing or because back in the 60s there were fewer TV shows that it had to compare to. I'm going to say they both had great writing, and though I think Next Generation's probably my favorite TV show of all time, I'm going to give it to the old one just for the hard-hitting episodes it did have.
All right. Maybe I need to rewatch some of the old series, but it's somewhat painful sometimes. All right. That would cause that category to come out with our third tie of the show, and that will leave us in our last two categories. See what happens here. In category 19, we're looking at the critical acclaim of these shows, whether it be awards, nominations, whether it be, just like the overall impact. We're not talking about the overall franchise and which franchise you liked or which series you liked better, but just more of what the series was able to accomplish from a critical acclaim standpoint, I guess. Obviously, if you went straight by the data, then that wouldn't be a discussion, but there might be a little bit of room for debate within that. If we're going on straight on awards, maybe not fair because the Next Generation was on for so much longer, but the original series was nominated for 28 different major awards, won 5 of them. The Next Generation was nominated for 86 major awards and won 32 of them, including the first ever syndicated series to be nominated for Outstanding Drama Series. How do you break this down as far as critical acclaim, what it meant to maybe pop culture or to the franchise in general, without necessarily giving your opinion on which series you liked better? Birdman, which one's better for acclaim?
I would argue TNG for sure, just because it won some really important awards, especially for writing, plus sound. So ultimately, critical acclaim, I got to go TNG for sure.
I think the other thing that the Next Generation might have done was more so legitimize Star Trek as a franchise in general. Maybe that's too strong of wording, but it did more to like say that this isn't just a science fiction thing. This isn't just a reboot or a second try at the original series to try to introduce us to new fans or whatever. I mean, it really took something and said, this is serious and this is something we're doing well. We're doing and we're going to do a good job with it. Based on all these awards, whether it be the technical aspects, the sound aspects, the writing, or whatever. Like, this is a serious show that deals with serious issues, and it wasn't just this, popcorn science fiction type series. So, I mean, it had that going for it, too. Matt, what do you think? And I'm not saying that the original series was any of that. I'm just saying, like, decades later, it had a certain impact with the Next Generation that allowed Deep Space Nine and the Voyager and et cetera to happen, which might not have happened without the success of the Next Generation.
Yeah. I mean, Star Trek was huge in the 90s, at least as far as I've ever seen. I don't know, like, part of me wants to just be bitter and be like, well, Will Wheaton got 2 awards on Next Generation, so the Next Generation's disqualified. But, like, you think about the original series and it had such far-reaching social things all the way across the world. And I don't know, maybe I'm just not versed as well, but I don't know of that happening with Next Generation. In a critical acclaim of the viewership rather than just the award organizations. Like, I don't think it's as clear-cut to me as it is to everyone else.
Fair enough. Steve, what do you think?
I think that, just for starters, I think the original series got kind of shafted just because it was nominated. For one, it was almost double the awards groups that
Right, more award
TNG
groups exist now than they did back then, so that's definitely a good way of looking at it.
I get, and the fact that it was so kind of new and different that it was either you liked it or you didn't. Whereas by the the 80s, when TNG came out in the early 90s, sci-fi was pretty much everywhere because the 80s kind of blew it out of proportion, and so did the late 70s, and if you were a sci-fi fan, this was kind of right up your alley anyway. And not only that, but you also had, this show, because of how successful it was, spawned 2 other shows that are in the same century continuity.
Right. And I don't want to make it sound like, obviously, without the original series, none of it happens, I guess, if it's not successful and lasts for the 3 years that it does. Thank God it lasted past that pilot. But so I don't want to make it seem like that Star Trek Next Generation should get all the credit or something, because obviously the Star Trek is the original series for a reason. And you're right, there's a lot more award groups around later on, so that's possibly a factor as to why the Next Generation had more awards and nominations and stuff like that. Steve, where do you think you're going with vote on this one, though?
Just because it was just overall there was more memorable aspects to the series, which is why it actually won more nominations. So I'd have to go with the Next Generation.
Matt, what did you think after all that?
I'm just gonna say the original one. I don't know. It's close. They both got good arguments.
Fair enough, which leads us to our final category. Last chance to influence the overall tally. This is just your own personal opinion. Which series is better, Dodd?
Ultimately, TNG, because it did run longer. It had a chance to tell more stories within it. But
Do
if
you
you
like
had to
TNG better?
I like TNG better, but I like the movies for the original series better.
That makes sense.
And I think I do appreciate what the original series accomplished in terms of the social impact that it needed to happen during the 60s. As Matt said, hearts and minds. That's very important in terms of the history of television. But in terms of creating a new generation of people opening up to science, I would say the Next Generation.
All right. Matt, what do you think?
I casted my vote like 3 ago when I said The Next Generation is my favorite TV show of all time, and I'm not changing that opinion. I have a lot of love for a lot of 60s shows, including the old Star Trek, but The Next Generation, not only did I grow up on it, when we rewatched it, like I mentioned, like 2 years ago, when we got to like season 7 and I had that realization that this is going to end, like I almost wanted to cry. I was like, this is so good, and I don't ever want it to end ever.
That's true. Steve, what do you think?
Actually, I'm gonna have to side with I'm gonna have to side with Mike completely on this one. There's no there's no way I could argue anything different.
All right. So that is 3 votes for the Next Generation, if I'm hearing everybody right. And I will echo that. I've never made a list, I guess, of what would be my favorite TV show of all time. I have a feeling Next Generation would be in my top 3, maybe edged out by MacGyver. But that's just me.
Is that a joke?
No. MacGyver is
Wow.
my number 1 favorite series of all time.
Interesting.
But Next Generation would be very probably close second or close third. I'd have to really look at a whole list of every TV series ever to figure that out. But I love Next Generation. I've probably seen every episode, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 times. I remember recording them on VHS tapes in my basement, like in middle school or whatever. And I was going to try to record every one so I could rewatch them again and again, because it was before DVDs and all that kind of stuff were really popular, etc. But it just is a great series to watch, and like you said, I watched that and I don't want it to end. I want to just keep going and keep seeing more of these characters, because I love all the characters and I love the topics they cover. So I will make this again for the Next Generation, which ends that category and ends the show. So we're going to take a quick timeout, and we'll be right back with the final verdict.
Returning for its 2nd year is GrandCon, Gaming and Comics Convention, on September 19th through the 21st at the Crown Plaza Hotel in Grand Rapids, Michigan.
This year, be prepared for more. With a guest list that easily doubles that of last year's, with artists such as Mark McKenna or game publishers like Jeff Grubb, it's easy to want to come check them out. There will be a silent charity auction, tons of panels for gaming and comics fans, and the list goes on and on. Registration is open. For more information, visit the website grand-con.com.
All right, thanks for sticking with us. The votes have all been tallied, and unlike episode 12, we do not have to worry. There is no tie here, so there will be a clear-cut winner between Trek, the original series, and Trek, the Next Generation. If you go total votes, it's 47-29. If you go categories, it's 11-5. So it's not even close. We were right in the initial thought process that we thought it might be a little bit of a slam dunk. The Next Generation takes this one hands down. So 11-5. If we went by an individual basis, Birdman, you voted Next Generation 10-9. Matt, you voted Next Generation 11-8. Steve, you voted Next Generation 12-7. And apparently I'm the most biased one on the group because I voted Next Generation 14-5. So all four of us had Next Generation winning this matchup. So we can put this argument to rest. Apparently the Next Generation is the better Star Trek series. Final thoughts, Birdman.
I'm the Picard, bitches!
Fair enough. Final thoughts, Steve.
I'm kind of not surprised, but yeah, it's undeniably the better series.
Fair enough. Matt, what do you think? Final thoughts.
I
Did it
think
go the way it should have.
Yeah. I think I would have been happier if it was a little bit closer, but I think if it had tied like Pirates and Ninjas, I'd have been a little upset. That said, like, if I had to be on a ship with all of the people, I would much rather be on the original guys, because I feel like there would be a more fun ship to be on. But, yeah, no, like...
Minus the holodeck.
Minus the technology differences.
Yeah.
The people were just so much fun. And great characters.
I think it'd be fun to sit at that poker table with number one and Worf and Geordi.
Yeah, if you like losing a lot of money.
I'll just create some more at the holodeck and be rich in there. All right, anybody else? Any final thoughts that we haven't got out there besides the Picard bitches? All right. I would like to thank Birdman, Steve, and Matt for joining me today in the War Zone. And, of course, thanks to everybody else for listening. Several ways to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show. Visit the website, www.geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on all our posts. You can also go to episode 12, Pirates vs. Ninjas, and cast a final vote to try to determine a winner for there. You can send email to feedback@geekcastradio.com. Please go to iTunes and leave us feedback there. Obviously, Wars is just now making a resurgence. We've been off for a while, so go to iTunes and give us some thoughts on how the show's going. Follow us on Twitter, Geekcast Radio. Steve, what's your Twitter?
SCP-21.
Birdman?
It is @BirdmanDodd, #Picard bitches.
Birdman, anything else that you'd like to pimp out as far as things that people should be going to find you at?
Well, you can always find me at thisweekingeek.net. You can occasionally hear me on Toronto radio, usually on News Talk 1010, depending on who's producing that day. And I'm always around on television, so keep watching.
Always causing havoc on Twitter, so follow him there. You can see what all the stuff he made fun of me about. I'm just kidding. Matt, what's your Twitter?
I'm @FridleySent. And I have one podcast that's not on the Geekcast Radio Network, which is Rhapsody Cast. We're on YouTube, Podomatic, iTunes. You can find us.
Absolutely. Check that out. And I would be on Twitter @OptimusSolo. You can also become a fan of us on Facebook. That way you can see everything that comes out that's Geekcast Radio related, episodes and everything. All right. So we hope you enjoyed this episode of GCRN Wars. Hope that you'll join us next time when we once again take two geek topics and pit them against each other in an epic battle to the death. For now, live long and prosper, and engage.
You've just listened to GCRN Wars on GeekCastRadio.com. If you would like to leave feedback on the show, there are many ways to do so. You can visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on the episode in all of our different podcasts. Be sure to rate our show on iTunes and leave us feedback. Follow us on Twitter at Geekcast Radio. Become a fan of us on Facebook by searching Geekcast Radio Network. You can email us at feedback@geekcastradio.com. Call the voicemail line 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you were leaving the message for and your name. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.